All right, you guys, I want to do a quick talk through of the chef's story and some examples of the chef's story for addition and subtraction. So the chef's story is a handy way for us to think about adding, subtracting, and eventually multiplying integers. And what the chef's story says is we've got this fictional cauldron. So this is going to represent my cauldron here, our whiteboard here. And then we have hot and cold cubes. Now generally we use blue for our cold cubes and we'd use red for our hot cubes. But because I'm trying to do it with like these little magnetic tiles, I actually have orange, so orange is going to represent my hot cubes. So I'll just put these up here. So blue represents 1 degree cooler, orange represents 1 degree warmer. And so in doing this, we can simulate addition and subtraction of integers and look at what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go through the examples that are in our chef story little writing thing here. So for example, suppose the chef started out with 4 hot cubes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 10 cold cubes were dumped into the cauldron. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we started with 4, and then I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this is our final arrangement in the column. So how would the temperature of the cauldron, sorry I said column earlier, change? Well, let's think about it. We started with these 4 hot cubes. Well, 4 hot cubes mean our cauldron started with a temperature of positive 4 degrees. And then we added in, so whenever we add something to the cauldron, we're going to use that plus sign. We added in 10 cold cubes. Now 10 cold cubes I'd represent by -10, meaning each one of these cubes lowers the temperature. So altogether they're going to lower the temperature of my cauldron by 10 degrees. Now, if I want to think about the overall temperature of my cauldron, well, just looking at my picture, notice that anytime I have a hot and a cold cube, they make a 0 pair. In other words, this 1 degree warm, 1 degree cold is nothing. It's just degree 0. So I've got 4 of those little 0 pairs, but then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cold cubes unmatched, meaning the overall temperature of my cauldron is going to be -6. This also tells me that 4 plus -10 equals -6. We could also model this on a number line if we wanted. So let's see. So if I modeled this on a number line, I would start at 4. So I'd start here at 4. And then remember that the negative tells me which direction I'm moving. So in this case, I'm going to move to the left. So I'd move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to the left, and I'd end at -6. Same answer that we got here. All right, let's look at the next example. So I'm going to take all of my cubes off here. The next example says, assume the chef started with 3 hot cubes. Okay, so they started with 3 hot cubes. Okay, and then it says they removed 2 cold cubes. So something a little interesting is happening here. Here's what I started with. I started with 3 hot cubes. In other words, I'm starting with a cauldron temperature of 3. That's what 3 hot cubes really means. But then that next part, it says I'm supposed to remove 2 cold cubes. There aren't any cold cubes in my cauldron right now. So here's a little trick that we can think of. I can have as many 0 pairs in my cauldron and not actually change the temperature of my cauldron as I want. So for example, if I add a hot and a cold cube in there, isn't the temperature of my cauldron still 3 degrees? So I'm going to just add a couple of those 0 pairs at the bottom of my cauldron because it doesn't change anything in terms of the temperature of my cauldron. Well, maybe I'll add 5 0 pairs. And notice I'm calling these 0 pairs because they have a net worth of 0. So if this is what I currently have in my cauldron still has a net worth of 3 degrees. In other words, I have 3 unbalanced hot cubes. Okay, so now I'm in my starting situation. I'm starting with 3 hot cubes, and now I can remove 2 cold cubes. So I'm going to take away 2 cold cubes. 1, 2. I'm taking them out of my pot. Okay. Well, just in general, let's think about what happens. If I took away these 2 cold cubes, or I took away 2 cold things, the overall temperature of my cauldron is going to increase or going to go up, and that's what we see here. How would we model this? Well, we started with 3 hot cubes and we removed, so we're taking away. Anytime we're taking away, right, that's a subtraction action. And what did we take away? We took away 2 of these cold cubes. So that means I took away -2. So this action, starting with a net worth of 3, taking away 2 colds, would be 3 minus -2. Now, if I think about the overall temperature of my cauldron, it went from 3 degrees, and now what's the temperature of my cauldron? This is still 0, 0, 0, but I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unbalanced hot cubes, meaning the overall temperature of my cauldron is 5. Notice that this also gives some meaning to why subtracting a negative becomes a positive. I'm taking away cold things. It's like I'm removing ice cubes from my cauldron. If I remove ice cubes, I expect the overall temperature to go up. Taking away a negative becomes a positive. Similarly, if I think about this on a number line, okay, so on my number line, I'm going to start at 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then think about it like this. Normally, if I was subtracting, I would think about moving to the left because subtraction tells me to go to the left. But my -2, I can think of it as an opposite action. So instead of going to the left, subtracting a negative, I do the opposite and I move to the right. So I'm going to move to the right. 1, 2. Ending at 5. Talk a little bit more about that in the number line video. All right, let's do one more example here. The last example, kind of in the starting examples for our chef story. All right, so clearing my cauldron. Okay, so now we're going to start, and the chefs wrote -5 minus +6. Oops. Pause for a minute because that's my phone. Okay, so now we have the situation the chefs wrote -5 minus +6, and we're going to try and model this with our cubes. Okay, so a couple of things. I always like to kind of seed my cauldron with some 0 pairs. Notice that this doesn't change anything. And when we get to thinking of multiplication, this is also going to be handy. So another way of thinking of this is we always want to start out with our cauldron sort of at neutral, meaning I don't want my cauldron to have any initial temperature before I start working with my numbers here. Okay, so right now my cauldron's at 0 because all of these are 0 pairs. In other words, they just cancel out. So my cauldron's at 0. So I'm going to start looking at what we have here. So we start with this number. That number's -5. I know how to represent -5. I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cold cubes. So I'm starting with -5. And then this says subtraction means take away. I'm going to take away 6 hot cubes. Okay, so I'm starting at -5. I'm going to take away 6 hot cubes. Notice this is why I need the 0 pairs. Okay, so I'm going to take away 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I've taken away 6 hot cubes. Take away 6 hot cubes. Let's look at the overall temperature in my cauldron now. Well, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 unbalanced cold cubes, meaning I'm at a temperature of negative 11. Okay, all right. The last thing that I want to do on this video is in your activity, I'm going to give you some pictures, so some pictorial representations, and ask you to figure out what the chefs did. So you get to deal with my super awesome cauldron drawing, which might look something like this. There's my cauldron, looks like a hot water bottle. And then since it's a black and white copy, I use H's for hot cubes and C's for cold cubes. Okay, so a typical drawing might look something like this. Let's see if we can interpret this. Okay, so I'm starting, right? Here's what I started with, and then notice that this box and this arrow implies an action, okay? So before I take out, the arrow shows that I'm taking away, let's look at what we had. Well, notice that these down here are 0 pairs, so hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. Those cancel. So what I start with is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hot cubes, or positive 5. I'm taking away is a subtraction action, and I'm taking away 1, 2, 3 hot cubes. Okay, when I do that, right, I'm on the board, so I have the option of saying, oh, I'm going to take those away. When I take away those 3 hot cubes, I'm left just with 2. So this would be a way of modeling 5 minus 3 equals 2. So in the second part of that assignment, you're asked to kind of look at my awesome drawings and try and figure out what's the number sentence that matches the action that's going on with a chef story. All right, if you have questions, as always, let me know.